11 terrifying archaeological discoveries. Caught on camera. The last one is unexplainable. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Ancient History Channel. My friend, there are secrets of the past that seem to have been asleep beneath layers of earth for hundreds, even thousands of years. And then one day, they suddenly come to light in ways we can never forget. And the striking thing is, archaeological discoveries don't always just bring simple excitement or curiosity sometimes. They can send chills down your spine. Just imagine this: you're standing in front of an ancient site, once the trace of a civilization that has long disappeared. Everything is already mysterious enough, but when close-up images are captured, from mummies with strange expressions, to skeletons positioned in puzzling ways, to artifacts carrying deeply mystical stories, everything suddenly becomes so real that it makes you shudder. What's even more fascinating is that what makes these discoveries truly special isn't just their historical value, but the very real feeling they evoke, as if the past is staring directly back at us. So have you ever wondered what those things buried deep beneath the ground are really hiding? If you have, then join me in today's video, where we'll explore archaeological discoveries captured in the closest detail, moments where science and fear seem to intersect. Get yourself ready, because after watching this, you might never look at history the same way again. Now, let's begin with our very first discovery. A 1,400-year-old Nubian child mummy with mysterious tattoos that have left scientists puzzled. Have you ever wondered if one day we could touch the past? What would it tell us? Not through words, but through silent traces buried deep beneath the earth for thousands of years. If you haven't, then come with me to the land of Kulub Narti in northern Sudan, where the Nile River still flows as if it has never cared about time. Here, a team of experts from the University of Missouri-St. Louis conducted excavations at an ancient burial site belonging to the Chinefab tradition. At first, they thought it would be nothing more than a routine survey, digging up a few skeletons, documenting them, and analyzing the findings. But things are never that simple, right? And indeed, as they dug deeper, they began to realize that this site held far more mysteries than they had imagined. Ancient graves lay close together, as if an entire community had once lived here and then quietly vanished. And then, among all these discoveries, one small detail made everyone stop in their tracks: the remains of a child. At first glance, it didn't seem particularly unusual, but upon closer examination, scientists determined that this was the mummy of an ancient Nubian child, dating back approximately 1,400 years. Just imagine it: a small life that had lain there for over a millennium, surrounded by dust and time, yet still preserving traces that leave modern humans scratching their heads. What does that tell us? But that's not all. What truly made this discovery extraordinary was the child's face. At first, experts noticed strange dots on the upper part of the face. At a glance, they seemed like dirt or marks left by decomposition. But the more they observed, the more something felt off. These markings weren't random. They appeared in a deliberate pattern. So the team decided to turn to modern technology, multispectral imaging, a technique that allows researchers to see beyond what the naked eye can detect. And what they discovered shocked everyone. These were not stains. They were not signs of damage. They were tattoos. At this point, you probably froze for a moment, just like I did. A child believed to be no more than 3 years old with tattoos on their face? It's hard to even process, isn't it? And this very detail has opened up a series of questions that remain unanswered to this day. Could this have been part of a religious ritual practiced by the ancient Nubians? Or perhaps a protective symbol meant to guard the child from dangers they believed in? Or maybe it was a way to mark identity or social status from a very early age? As you can see, the more we try to understand, the more tangled everything becomes. What's remarkable is that even though modern technology has allowed us to clearly see these tattoos, their true meaning remains a mystery, and it's precisely these unanswered questions that make archaeology so captivating. It's not just about uncovering the past, it's about piecing together the shattered fragments of human memory. So if you were standing in front of this discovery, what would you think those tattoos meant? Faith, protection, or something far beyond our imagination? Leave your thoughts below, because who knows, you might be the one to offer the most compelling explanation for this 1,400-year-old mystery. Feather crown, found on the remains of a 7,000-year-old boy. Have you ever thought that a child who lived thousands of years ago could leave modern scientists completely baffled? It may sound hard to believe, but the story I'm about to tell you is not only strange, it also makes us reconsider how ancient people viewed death, and even the meaning of existence itself. Everything began in southern Sweden, near the Baltic coast, at an archaeological site known as Skateholm. This was once a burial ground for hunter-gatherer communities dating back to around 5,200 to 4,800 BC. Simply put, it's like a shared cemetery for people who lived more than 7,000 years ago. At first, when archaeologists began their research, they only found familiar things: bones, stone tools, charcoal, the usual traces of the Stone Age. But then, thanks to a completely new method, everything started to change. This method allowed scientists to detect extremely tiny remains left in the soil, such as strands of hair, animal fur, or bird feathers. Just think about it. Materials that's soft surviving for thousands of years is already rare, yet now we can actually detect them. Modern technology really is astonishing, isn't it? Using this approach, researchers collected a total of 139 soil samples from 35 graves at Skateholm. They sifted them, centrifuged them, and examined them carefully under microscopes. It may sound tedious, but it was precisely this patience that gradually revealed a series of hidden secrets. Among the analyzed samples, traces of animal fur appeared quite frequently, from otters and deer to unexpected species like bats and owls. In one grave, researchers even found feathers from multiple species concentrated around the head of a young man. Along with that were beads made from red deer teeth, suggesting that he may have been buried wearing a specially decorated headdress. But that still wasn't the most striking discovery. Among all the remains, one case left archaeologists almost stunned: the body of a child. When analyzing the soil around the child's burial site, scientists discovered microscopic traces, including a strand of deer hair and, most notably, a feather believed to belong to a woodpecker. These traces were located right around the child's head, leading researchers to propose a fascinating hypothesis. The child may have been buried in clothing made from deer hide, with a crown adorned with woodpecker feathers placed on his head. A child who lived 7,000 years ago, yet was buried with details resembling symbols of status or special ritual significance. It raises an unavoidable question: who was this boy? And it doesn't stop there. Researchers also found that at least 21 individuals in the cemetery were buried with feathers, most of them from water birds. Some traces were located around the head and neck, suggesting they may have been used as headdresses, possibly decorative or perhaps spiritual symbols. In addition, some graves contain special items such as brown bear teeth, amber beads, tools made of bone and stone, and red ochre, materials commonly associated with ancient rituals and beliefs. All of these details come together to form a deeply mysterious picture. Could this child have belonged to a family of high status? Or did that feather crown carry spiritual meaning, perhaps serving as a guide for the soul into the afterlife? No one can say for certain what truly happened, but as you can see, from the tiniest particles hidden in the soil, an entire world of the past slowly comes back to life before our eyes. And that is truly fascinating, isn't it? 32 monkey skeletons in an ancient cemetery reveal an unbelievable secret of the Roman army. Have you ever imagined that in an ancient cemetery, where only humans were expected to be buried, dozens of monkey skeletons would appear? Probably not, right? I felt the same way. At first it sounds incredibly strange, but the more you look into it, the more you realize it's absolutely real. And it happened at the port of Berenice, located along Egypt's Red Sea coast, once a bustling trade hub in ancient times. When archaeologists from Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities began excavating an animal cemetery at this site, they initially thought they would find only a few ordinary pet remains. But as they dug deeper, brushing away layer after layer of sand, small skeletons slowly began to emerge. Not one, not two, but a total of 32 skeletons of long-tailed monkeys. All of them were carefully buried in an orderly manner, clearly not the result of animals simply dying and being randomly covered by sand. According to analysis, these remains date back to the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, during the time when Roman troops were present in the area. But what truly surprised scientists wasn't just the number of monkeys, it was how they were treated. You see, these monkeys weren't just buried, they were buried with grave goods, just like humans. In some graves, alongside the monkey remains, researchers found 2 large seashells, a carefully woven basket, and even a folded piece of fabric shaped like a doll. These may seem like small details, but they reveal a great deal. They suggest that these monkeys were not regarded as ordinary animals. It's very likely that Roman soldiers stationed in Berenice kept long-tailed monkeys as pets, but it didn't stop at simply keeping them for amusement. They appear to have formed a deep emotional bond with them, almost like members of their own family. Just think about it. In the harsh environment of an ancient military camp, where war and discipline dominated everything, these soldiers still found the time to care for and show affection toward these small creatures. And when the animals died, they were given proper burials, complete with accompanying items like a heartfelt farewell. Hearing this, doesn't everything suddenly feel a little more human? What's fascinating is that through these burial practices, researchers can sense the level of respect and care the owners had for their pets. The graves were not crude or careless, they were intentionally arranged, showing that this was not a random act, but part of a habit or even a cultural practice. And through that, a very different perspective on the ancient Roman army is revealed. They were not just cold, hardened warriors on the battlefield, they were also human beings capable of love, attachment, and compassion, even toward animals that might seem so unusual to us today. The strange skulls in an ice cave and the Nazi briefcase. When people think of Nazi Germany, they often picture war, violence, and an unsettling ambition for world domination. But few realize that behind that powerful machine existed another world, one filled with bizarre experiments, mystical beliefs, and expeditions that pushed far beyond the limits of science. And the story we're about to explore might make you rethink everything you thought you knew about the Nazis. It all began in 2014, when an expedition led by Russian scientist Vladimir Melikov ventured into the Adygea region of the Caucasus Mountains. This is a remote and rugged area where nature has remained largely untouched by human influence. And it was here, near Mount Bolshoi and close to the village of Kamenomostsky, that they discovered something that still has no clear explanation to this day. Inside a freezing, deep, and nearly lightless cave, the team came across 2 identical skulls. At first, that might not sound unusual, but what shocked everyone was that these skulls did not belong to any known animal species in the region, nor were they human. Initially, Melikov thought they might be fossils of an extinct species, but the more closely he examined them, the more bizarre they seemed. Each skull had a round opening at the base, similar to where a spine would connect, suggesting that the creature may have walked upright on 2 legs. But here's the strange part. There was no jaw, and the overall skull structure didn't resemble that of a human. The eye sockets were unusually large, while the facial bones were flat, somewhat similar to those of apes. Altogether, these features formed a shape unlike anything ever officially documented by science. At this point, you're probably wondering, if it's not human and not an animal, then what is it? Yes, that's exactly the question. And not just for you and me. Melikov himself admitted that it's hard not to consider the possibility that these could be the remains of an extraterrestrial being. But what made the story even more intriguing was another discovery made shortly afterward, in the forest near the cave. According to reports from Komsomolskaya Pravda, scientists found a large brown briefcase with a leather handle. Despite its age, it was still in relatively good condition. And when they opened it, what they found inside left everyone stunned. There was a photograph of a Nazi soldier, dressed in uniform, wearing a peaked cap with the insignia of the Edelweiss Mountain Division on his chest. In addition, there were detailed maps of the Adygea region dating back to 1941. Most notably, the maps clearly displayed the emblem of the mysterious organization known as Ahnenerbe. At this point, a major question arises. What was Ahnenerbe, and why would traces of it appear in such a remote place? Ahnenerbe was founded in 1935 by Heinrich Himmler, along with Hermann Wirth and Richard Walter Daré. Officially, it was an institute dedicated to research in archaeology, anthropology, and German culture. But in reality, it was behind numerous unusual expeditions across the world, from Europe to Africa and even Tibet, seeking ancient artifacts, mystical traces, and possibly supernatural powers. Did you know that Adolf Hitler and several high-ranking Nazi leaders believed in the existence of ancient knowledge or technologies beyond human understanding? They believed that if such things could be discovered, they could gain an overwhelming advantage in war. Because of that, Unexplainable expanded rapidly, with nearly 50 research branches covering everything from archaeology and long-term weather forecasting to studies of ESP, UFOs, and other paranormal phenomena. Now think about it: if such an organization once set foot in the Adigea Mountains, what was their purpose? Was that briefcase simply something left behind by accident, or was it evidence of a secret mission? It's hard to say, but according to Melikov and several Russian researchers of paranormal phenomena, it's possible that Unexplainable conducted an operation in this region, one that may have involved non-earthly beings. They may have been searching for, studying, or even attempting to harness technology from such entities to serve their war ambitions. However, not everyone agrees with this theory. Some scientists argue that the skulls are simply animal bones, possibly sheep or another species, that became deformed over time due to geological pressure. Others even suspect they may have been deliberately fabricated. What makes the situation even more puzzling is that when Melikov sent images of these skulls to paleontologists in Moscow, he received no response at all, neither confirmation nor denial. That silence has led many to wonder, is something being hidden, or is the scientific community simply unwilling to engage with such a sensitive topic? And to this day, these strange skulls have never been fully analyzed or publicly explained. They remain there, an unresolved mystery suspended between the boundaries of science and the unknown. So what do you think? Is this merely a natural misunderstanding, or could it truly be evidence of something not from this world? Ancient human remains with heart-shaped skulls. You know, the ancient world is filled with mysteries that even today, modern humans still can't fully unravel. Some archaeological discoveries don't just spark curiosity, they can send chills down your spine when you think about how people in the past lived, what they believed, and the things they did. Things that might seem impossible by today's standards. This time, the story comes from an ancient region in Mexico, and it stands as powerful proof of that. Once again, it has left scientists with a long list of unanswered questions. During a recent excavation, researchers from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History discovered two extremely unusual skulls at the Casa Colorada complex, part of the La Ferreria archaeological site in northwestern Mexico. At first, that might sound ordinary, but upon closer inspection, these two skulls had a shape strikingly similar to a heart. These skulls were just part of a larger discovery, 16 sets of human remains in total. Among them were 8 adults, mostly between the ages of 30 and 40, and the rest were children between 1 and 7 years old. Unfortunately, most of the remains had been damaged over time, leaving only 3 adult skeletons in relatively good condition. But it was those two unusual skulls that captured everyone's attention. After careful examination, experts determined that the heart-shaped form was not natural. Instead, it was the result of intentional cranial deformation, performed when the individuals were still very young. What's particularly remarkable is that this type of deformation had never been recorded before at La Ferreria, making this discovery extremely rare and difficult to explain. At this point, you might be wondering, how could ancient people have done something like that? In fact, intentional skull shaping was not uncommon in many ancient cultures, especially in the Mesoamerican region, which includes much of present-day Mexico and Central America. People believed that the shape of the skull could reflect social status, religious beliefs, or aesthetic standards within the community. This process usually began shortly after birth, when an infant's skull was still soft and malleable. They would use wooden boards, bindings, or simple tools to apply pressure and gradually reshape the skull according to their desired form. Over time, the skull would grow into the predetermined shape. It may sound disturbing to us, but for them, it was a normal part of cultural life. However, what makes these two skulls truly unique is their heart-shaped form, a type of deformation never seen before. So the question is, why a heart shape? What did it mean in their culture? Was it a symbol of life, emotion, or perhaps part of a spiritual ritual that we have yet to fully understand? To begin answering that, we need to look at the broader context of the region. La Ferreria was once home to pre-Hispanic communities between 600 and 1350 AD. It wasn't just a place to live, it was also a cultural center, featuring important structures such as circular ceremonial areas, pyramid-like buildings, and even ball courts, an essential part of ancient spiritual life. The Casa Colorada complex, where the skulls were found, dates specifically from 600 to 950 AD. This area covers about 6,460 square feet and includes 9 rectangular structures arranged around a central open space. Previous excavations in the area have also uncovered numerous burials, leading researchers to believe this was a designated zone for the dead, where important funeral rituals took place. So, it's possible that these heart-shaped skulls are not just a strange anomaly, but part of a special ritual practice. Perhaps these individuals held significant roles within their community, or were chosen for ceremonies with deep spiritual meaning. But for now, all of this remains speculation, because to this day, scientists have not yet been able to determine exactly why these two skulls were shaped this way. 2,000-year-old Greek tomb containing human remains and chariots. Just imagine this. An ancient tomb is opened, and inside, there aren't only human remains, but also intact chariots and the skeletons of horses buried alongside them. Sounds like something straight out of a historical movie, right? But no, this is completely real. It happened in the region of Thrace, in northeastern Greece, where archaeologists discovered a burial site known as Doxapara. From the very first layers of soil, they realized this was no ordinary burial ground. And as they dug deeper, what gradually emerged left everyone astonished. According to research, the tomb dates back to the early 2nd century AD, nearly 2,000 years ago. Inside, experts found the remains of 4 adults, 3 men and 1 woman. Based on the burial style and the accompanying artifacts, they believe this may have been a wealthy landowning family with high social status at the time. But what makes this tomb extraordinary isn't just the number or condition of the remains, it's what was buried with them. At the site, archaeologists uncovered 4 large burial pits containing human remains, surrounded by numerous offerings such as pottery, glass, bronze objects, lampstands, oil lamps, weapons, jewelry, and even wooden boxes. These items not only held material value, but also reflected ancient beliefs about the afterlife, a world where the dead would still need the familiar objects of daily life. But that's not all. An even more astonishing discovery soon followed. 5 chariots, along with the skeletons of 5 horses, buried right there in the tomb. You heard that right. Not models, not carvings, but real chariots and real horses. According to archaeologists, these chariots may have been the very vehicles used to transport the deceased to their final resting place. Afterward, they, and the horses, were buried as part of the funeral ritual. At this point, you're probably wondering, why bury horses and chariots along with the dead? In fact, in Thracian society, the culture that once thrived in this region, horses were not just a means of transportation. They were symbols of power, authority, and prestige. Horse-mounted warriors were considered elite, and their cavalry skills were renowned throughout the region. Owning multiple horses was a clear sign of high social standing. And what about the chariots? They weren't just tools for transport, they also represented technological advancement and wealth. The more elaborate the chariot, the greater the owner's power and status. That's why burying the dead alongside horses and chariots was no random act. It was a way for people to assert their status, not only in life, but even in death. At the same time, they believed these vehicles would continue to serve the deceased in the journey beyond. What makes the Doxapara tomb especially remarkable is that all these elements appear together and have been preserved to an astonishing degree. From the human remains to the chariots and horse skeletons, everything forms a complete picture of the burial practices of a powerful class from thousands of years ago. And now, you might be wondering, just like many others, is this simply a ritual reflecting status and belief? Or does it hold a deeper meaning about how ancient people understood death and the afterlife? Because sometimes, what lies beneath the ground isn't just the past, it's a set of questions that, even today, we still haven't been able to answer. A World War II plane lost in the Himalayas. When it comes to plane crashes and disappearances, there's one tragedy many of us can never forget. The crash of the Germanwings Airbus A320. On March 24, 2015, the aircraft went down in the French Alps, between Barcelonnette and Duigné, while flying from Barcelona to Dusseldorf. The plane was carrying 144 passengers and 6 crew members. According to the Telegraph, radar data showed the aircraft descending in both altitude and speed before it disappeared. France's Europe. One radio, citing a witness, reported that the plane was flying lower than usual. This may have been the reason it collided with the mountain range. However, this is far from the only case in history of an aircraft disappearing in mountainous terrain. Another deeply emotional story of search and discovery has emerged from the Himalayas, where a transport plane was finally found nearly 80 years after it vanished, carrying with it the fate of 13 people on a fateful flight in early 1945. The aircraft had taken off from Kunming, China, and was en route to Arunachal Pradesh, a region located between India and China. Severe weather pushed it into treacherous mountain terrain, and from that moment on, there was no trace of the plane or those on board. Years later, American explorer Clayton Culloz became the key figure in the search. He was hired by a relative of one of the missing passengers. His expedition team traveled hundreds of miles through dense jungle terrain, enduring months of harsh conditions. Tragically, 3 local guides who assisted the mission lost their lives to the cold while camping in the icy wilderness. Finally, in December 2021, the team discovered the aircraft buried beneath snow. They confirmed it was the long-lost plane by identifying its tail number. However, no human remains were found inside, only the remnants of a tragic event that had once taken place. Bill Scherer, who had hired Culloz and Lives in New York, shared his emotions upon hearing the news. "I'm very glad to know he has been found. It's a heartbreaking story, but it also brings a sense of closure. I grew up without a father. My mother lived with grief and never knew how her husband died. She had to face many hardships raising me. I was only 13 months old at the time." It's also known that during World War II, hundreds of U.S. military aircraft went missing across the India-China-Myanmar region. Despite numerous search efforts and various theories, the exact causes of these disappearances remain unknown to this day and continue to be one of humanity's enduring mysteries. As you can see, our world is filled with mysteries that are both fascinating and difficult to fully understand, isn't it? The Lighthouse of Alexandria rises from the seafloor. In the heart of the deep blue Mediterranean, beneath the calm waters surrounding Egypt's Pharos Island, a wonder that had lain dormant for centuries has been awakened. Not by magic, but by the persistence and breakthroughs of modern archaeologists. In an unprecedented underwater excavation, an international research team led by France's CNRS, National Center for Scientific Research, has announced a discovery that has sent shockwaves through both the academic world and history enthusiasts worldwide. 22 massive stone blocks, once part of the legendary Lighthouse of Alexandria, have been raised from the seabed. This monumental structure, once known as the Light of the Ancient World, is now gradually being reconstructed, not only with limestone and columns, but also through cutting-edge simulation technology known as the Pharos Project. Built around 280 BC during the reign of Ptolemy II Philadelphus, a successor to one of Alexander the Great's closest generals, the Pharos Lighthouse was a masterpiece of engineering for its time. Standing at least about 328 feet tall, it was not merely a navigational aid, but a symbol of power. A towering beacon that illuminated the skies above Alexandria, the intellectual and cultural capital of the ancient world. At the top of the lighthouse burned a massive fire day and night, its light reflected by a giant mirror, believed to have projected its beam dozens of miles out to sea, guiding ships safely across the treacherous Mediterranean. Some legends even claim that this mirror could focus sunlight intensely enough to burn enemy ships from a distance, though this has never been proven. In the Civil War, Book 3, Sections 111 to 112, Julius Caesar recorded the strategic importance of Pharos Island. When he entered Egypt in 48 BC and confronted the forces of Ptolemy XIII, control of the lighthouse gave him a crucial advantage, ultimately helping him place Cleopatra, his famed lover, on the throne. The lighthouse was not just a structure, it was a key piece in one of the greatest political games of the Roman era, a symbol of power, dominance, and illumination for a rising empire. However, after nearly 1,600 years of proud existence, the structure could not withstand the fury of nature. 3 major earthquakes in AD 956, 1303, and 1323 gradually brought the lighthouse down, reducing it to ruins. By 1480, the remaining stones of the wonder were repurposed to build the Cape Bay Citadel, a military fortress constructed directly on its original foundations, as if history had layered itself upon its own past. And yet, history is never truly finished. Today, the limestone blocks that once formed this wonder, including doorframes, thresholds, foundation slabs, and even a Ptolemaic-era column adorned with intricate carvings are being recovered from the seabed, marking a major step forward in underwater archaeology. What makes this effort even more remarkable is that the Pharaohs project is not just about excavation. With funding from the Dassault Systems Foundation, experts are using advanced 3D simulations to recreate the entire lighthouse in a virtual environment, from its architectural structure to its construction and eventual collapse. Through this, we don't just see a building, we witness the hands, the minds, and the ambition of the ancient people who created it. According to the research team, the Lighthouse of Alexandria can be considered the first skyscraper in human history, far surpassing other structures of its time in both height and technical complexity. Its combination of geometric design, limestone construction techniques, and light-reflecting mechanisms made Pharos a symbol of the peak of science, engineering, and aesthetics in the ancient world. Though it has been lost for more than 700 years, its greatness still echoes through every stone, now slowly being rediscovered, revealing its secrets piece by piece. Of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, only the Great Pyramid of Giza still stands today. The others, such as the statue of Zeus at Olympia, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and the Temple of Artemis, have been destroyed or left behind little to no clear archaeological trace. That's why reconstructing even a part of the Lighthouse of Alexandria is not just a triumph of archaeology, it is a way for us to reconnect with the extraordinary achievements of our ancestors. In a modern world filled with noise, touching a single stone that once stood in an ancient wonder is an act that makes us bow our heads, not only in awe of its greatness, but also in respect for the passage of time that has left its quiet whispers behind for those willing to listen. And now, beneath the deep waters of Alexandria, that wonder is slowly coming back to life, not just in history books, but in footage, in virtual models, and in every deep dive made by researchers. Once again, the light of Pharos shines, this time not only for ships at sea, but for all those searching for the meaning of history and memory. Truly impressive, isn't it? Perfectly preserved, 3,000-year-old mummy reveals the afterlife of ancient Egypt. In the heart of a dry desert where time seems to have stood still for thousands of years, archaeologists unexpectedly opened a stone coffin and inside lay a mummy almost perfectly preserved, as if it had been buried just yesterday. Just hearing that gives you chills, doesn't it? But this is a completely real story that recently took place in the mysterious land of ancient Egypt. The discovery was made in the El Asasef area, in Luxor, along the Nile River, not far from the Valley of the Kings, where many famous pharaohs were laid to rest. From the location alone, you can already sense that this is no ordinary find. Inside the tomb, archaeologists uncovered 2 stone coffins. Interestingly, one of them had already been opened. Inside was the mummy of a priest who held an extremely important role. He was identified as Thaw Erket If, the supervisor of the entire mummification process for the pharaohs, a role that was both highly technical and deeply spiritual. But what truly captured public attention was the second coffin. When it was opened, archaeologists revealed the mummy of a woman in an almost perfectly preserved condition, despite being around 3,000 years old. Every layer of linen wrapping, every detail of her body remained remarkably clear, leaving many in awe of the ancient Egyptians' mummification techniques. According to Egypt's Minister of Antiquities, Khalid al-Anani, the 2 coffins belong to different periods. One reflects the style of the 17th dynasty, while the other dates to the 18th dynasty, considered the peak of ancient Egyptian civilization. The 18th dynasty, beginning around the 13th century BC, was the era of legendary pharaohs such as Tutankhamun and Ramses II. It was a time when Egypt reached the height of its power, artistry, and religious belief. That's why every discovery from this period holds immense value for researchers. What makes this discovery even more remarkable is that the entire coffin opening process was conducted in front of international media. This was not just an excavation. It was a historic event that drew global attention. And that's not all. Inside the tomb, archaeologists also found 5 masks and approximately 1,000 Ushabti figurines, small statues that ancient Egyptians believed would serve the deceased in the afterlife. Isn't that fascinating? Ancient people didn't just prepare for death, they prepared for an entirely new life beyond it. Additionally, the tomb contained numerous skeletons and skulls dating back nearly 4,000 years, suggesting that the site may have been used across multiple generations. Each layer of remains, each set of bones, acts like a piece of a puzzle, helping to tell the story of life, death, and belief in one of the greatest civilizations in human history. However, one mystery still remains. The identity of the woman in the second coffin is still unknown. Who was she? A noblewoman? A high-ranking figure in society? Or someone with a special role in religious rituals? Archaeologists continue their research, hoping that more secrets will gradually come to light. But one thing is certain: discoveries like this don't just help us understand the past. They also remind us that what ancient people believed and prepared for in death can be far more complex and profound than we might imagine today. So what do you think? Are these mummies simply historical remains, or could they be a doorway to a world that modern humanity still doesn't fully understand? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below so we can explore this mystery together. The mysterious girl, buried among shells in a 5,900-year-old tomb. More than 5,900 years ago, a mysterious young woman, with the powerful arms of an athlete, was laid to rest in an ancient tomb along the Caribbean coast, becoming one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in Lower Central America. This tomb, identified as the oldest in the region, has drawn widespread attention from scientists and researchers. Recently, a study published in the scientific journal Antiquity revealed unique details about burial practices in Central America thousands of years ago. Based on this very site, Professor Mirjana Roxandic, an anthropologist at the University of Winnipeg, Canada, and the lead researcher, stated that what makes this tomb remarkable is the astonishing level of preservation of the skeleton. Despite the tropical climate of Central America, which typically causes rapid decomposition of remains and artifacts, the woman's skeleton remained intact, thanks to a sophisticated burial method, likely carried out by her loved ones. The remains reveal that the woman died between the ages of 25 and 40. Although she stood at a modest height of about 4 feet 11 inches, she had a strong, well-built body, especially her muscular arms, which resembled those of a trained athlete. She was laid on her back inside the tomb, with her legs bent and her arms extended along her sides, at a depth of about 7.5 feet below the ground surface. The tomb itself had an oval shape and was covered with a layer of soil mixed with shells, snails, and other mollusks. These shell materials played a crucial role in reducing the soil's acidity, allowing the skeleton to remain exceptionally well preserved for thousands of years. Even more interesting is that the site also contains shell mounds, structures commonly found in archaeological contexts, often associated with burial rituals or used to mark important locations. Archaeologists believe that this woman was not an ordinary individual, but likely a skilled paddler, someone who regularly rowed boats. This would explain her unusually strong arms. In fact, the image of a strong woman with powerful upper body strength is not uncommon in communities from this region, especially in Monkey Point, where the tomb was discovered. Monkey Point, located along the coast of Nicaragua, a Central American country with a population of about 6 million people, still preserves similar traditions across generations. The local people continue to rely on boating and fishing as part of their daily lives. This tomb is not only an important archaeological landmark, but also a window into the distant past of Central America, helping us better understand the customs, lifestyles, and physical resilience of people who lived thousands of years ago. The story of this mysterious young woman with athlete-like arms doesn't just amaze us with the preservation of ancient remains, it also invites us to reflect on the strength, endurance, and determination of those who once lived in this region long ago. What do you think? 9 crocodile skulls guarding a mummy, a terrifying ritual in a 4,000-year-old tomb. You know, there are archaeological discoveries that make us wonder, what were ancient people thinking when they created rituals that are both strange and chilling? This story, set in an ancient cemetery in Egypt, is a perfect example, and it may make you rethink how people in the past viewed death. During an excavation, archaeologists opened 2 ancient tombs. At first, everything seemed familiar. Mummies lying in silence, traces of burial rituals, and a stillness that had lasted for thousands of years. But then, a shocking detail emerged. Surrounding one of the mummies were 9 monstrous skulls, deliberately arranged in a specific pattern. Upon closer examination, experts determined that these skulls actually belonged to ancient crocodiles, specifically species that once lived along the Nile River. What's particularly intriguing is that they were not mummified in the traditional Egyptian way. Instead, they were simply wrapped in cloth and placed around the deceased, as if carrying out a specific purpose. At this point, you're probably wondering, just like the researchers did, why crocodiles? And why place them around the mummy? According to initial findings, one of the two tombs belonged to Cheti, a high-ranking official during the reign of Pharaoh Nebuchadnezzar Mentuhotep II, who ruled from around 2055 to 2022 BC. This was a period when Egypt was recovering and consolidating power after a time of division, so individuals of high status were often buried with special rituals. However, the identity of the mummy in the second tomb remains unknown. This only deepens the mystery, because that individual may have held an equally important role in society at the time. Returning to the crocodile skulls, researchers believe they were more than just animal remains. In ancient Egyptian belief, crocodiles were closely associated with Sobek, a deity who could appear as a crocodile or as a human with a crocodile head. Sobek symbolized strength, power, and fertility. He was also closely linked to the pharaohs and was believed to protect people from the dangers of the Nile, a river that was both a source of life and a place of great risk. Because of this, placing crocodile skulls around the mummy may not have been random at all. It could have been a protective ritual, surrounding the deceased with the power of Sobek to safeguard them on their journey into the afterlife. Just think about it. If ancient people believed that death was only the beginning of a new journey, then preparing guardians for that journey makes perfect sense. But instead of humans or weapons, they chose one of the most feared creatures, crocodiles, as symbols of power and protection. What's truly astonishing is that these skulls remained there for nearly 4,000 years, lying silently in the darkness until they were discovered by modern humans. And even though many theories have been proposed, the biggest question still remains. Was this simply a symbolic ritual, or was it truly meant to protect the soul of the deceased according to ancient beliefs? What about you? If you were standing in front of a tomb surrounded by such skulls, would you see it as a religious practice or something even more terrifying? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. My friend, those were 11 astonishing archaeological discoveries that have forced the scientific community to reconsider what we once believed to be the truth about human history. Each artifact, each site is not only evidence of a lost civilization, but also a whisper from the past, reminding us that history still holds countless stories yet to be written. We've only just turned a few pages in humanity's massive book. What might the next discoveries reveal? If you enjoy the journey of uncovering truths buried by time, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Together, we'll continue exploring unsolved mysteries, where every new discovery has the power to change everything we thought we knew. For now, goodbye, and see you next time.